So why don't we get started? So this is our GTT community webinar around good to great, how learning objectives can make or break your workshop or presentation. And we thought about delivering this session today because in our program, we've got a couple students on the webinar today. We have been having a lot of conversation about that, haven't we, Steve? And Alicia knows as well, around how do we really understand the impact and power that learning objectives have in creating our program. So I'm Giselle Kovary, I'm managing partner at Global Training Transformation, and my wonderful colleague, partner, co-host, Susan Armstrong.
Yes, I'm Sue Armstrong, the other managing partner. And while Giselle is sitting in Toronto, I'm sitting in the UK. So it's not morning for me.
That's great.
Yeah, I've had many hours to have my coffee and
you're not in your pajamas, although sometimes we now spend full days in our pajamas.
Yes.
So we wanted to, first of all, start a session on learning objectives with our learning objectives for this webinar. When we thought about constructing this, we've pulled from some of our existing content and really wanted to focus in on three key areas that we find a number of people struggle with. So first and foremost, what is the importance of creating learning objectives? So when we're designing our training, what is the importance or the purpose of that? We're going to explore that. And we're going to identify how learning objectives link to levels of learning. And we're going to show a video clip from our program around Bloom's taxonomy and understanding what level are you trying to present to or train to if you're delivering a workshop. And then we're going to have you do some work. So we're going to have you actually write out proper learning objectives, or at least one or two learning objectives for your program. So start thinking now about the content that you want to use in that breakout activity. So either a program that you're building, or a past program that you want to go back and review and see how would we have done it better next time. So to get started, in the chat function, could you just type in, is there something specific you want us to focus in on today? Why does this topic matter to you, right? What is it about learning objectives? You can also unmute your phone if you want, but just if there's something really specific you want to make sure that we hone in on, that we don't miss out on, you can type in the chat function or you can unmute your phone.
All right. Well, while people are just thinking about that and doing that, I would like to just set the context, if you will, for this. And one of the things that I find in different areas of the world are different models around how training is done. And it's really interesting because a lot of times we look at a vertical model. People look at a vertical model. So they take a subject matter expert in one area, and they ask them to do training, and it ends up being a very long presentation. So there is a big difference, however, between a presentation and training. And there are three terms that get sort of thrown around interchangeably. So it's presentation, facilitation, and training. But if we look at this, a presentation is actually what we're doing here on the webinar. So it's one way, it's 80-20. It's from presenter information to the audience with a little bit of time for questions. At the very other end of that continuum is the art form of facilitation. The art form of facilitation, and it is a skill governed by the International Association of Facilitators. It's certified and everything else. It is exactly the opposite from presentation. It's 80% audience, 20% facilitator who is asking questions, listening, and guiding discussion. But most of the work is being done by the participants. So when we look at training and what good world-class training is, it sits down here at a 30-70 model. So it's part facilitation, part presentation, but 70% of the interaction comes from the participants. So we share a little bit of knowledge, we ask questions, we set up activities, but training these days, the expectation is 70% participation, only 30% from the actual course leader. And that's kind of a hard mindset shift to make for a lot of people. So I just would like to show, we're going to show a brief video clip from our online program, which talks about when it comes to learning, so training, there are actually different levels that we hit. And it's not always that a presentation is not appropriate. Sometimes it is if we're wanting to just transfer knowledge. But if we want people to actually learn to do something differently, we need to reach a different level in learning. So we're going to watch Giselle, who will talk.
So once we've made the decision that in fact we're going to be delivering training, it's important to consider the fact that there are different levels of learning that we all experience based on different types of activities. These are often referred to as Bloom's taxonomy. And those 6 levels are knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. When we're delivering a presentation, we're only hitting the knowledge and the comprehension level. When we make the decision to deliver training, we're moving over to those other 4 areas. And we use these levels of learning to assist us in creating learning objectives. It's really important to choose the right delivery method to meet your intended learning outcomes. So when we're delivering a presentation where we're focused on sharing knowledge and helping people understand something, this can be really effective. For example, you might be delivering a quarterly business review or a keynote presentation, or maybe you're even delivering a TED Talk. In these short presentations, we can spark interest in our audience and encourage them to learn more about the topic. This is when awareness raising can happen and interest is garnered around the subject area. But we haven't moved over into that training space yet. So let's look at this concept again in another way. Here's a pyramid that's used to describe Bloom's taxonomy. At the bottom, there's lower order thinking, and at the top, there's higher order thinking. No pyramid exists without a bottom, a middle, and a top. At that bottom is the foundation. It's the foundational knowledge. And that's really important. We all have to gather that information, and we need to share that with our audience. That knowledge is going to be very different based on the level of the audience that you are engaging. For example, if you're presenting to new hires, your knowledge will need to be more basic, more foundational than it would be if you're delivering to a senior leadership audience. So once you determine that in fact you want to help your audience know, understand, and apply something, we are no longer delivering a presentation, and we've made that shift over into training. We've crossed over into the space where we're going to focus on 30% of us sharing content and 70% of the audience doing something.
All right, so levels of learning then. Presentations hit that knowledge and comprehension level. But when we talk about learning or workshops, this is where we need to start to look at things a little bit differently. Sharing knowledge isn't going to be enough. So,
right.
Giselle?
Yeah, and there's a number of comments here. So first of all, thanks for putting in the chat function. I'm reading those comments, what you're interested in focusing on today. Some of you are building some new programs. Some of you want to understand how do we leverage it with SMEs, right? That's a really great point. Part of our program has been around making sure that we can deliver this basic foundational knowledge to subject matter experts who usually have to deliver training but have no background, Janice, often in how to do that. And Steve's talking about, the words and those phrases. We're going to get to some of that, Steve. And as you know, there's a lot more resources on that than we can get through today in the webinar. But those words and tone, and then the construction or that format of the learning objectives, we're going to address that, Alicia. And Steve's like, when would we consider focusing on the top 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy, and how would we go about it? So we will take that a little offside, Steve, because we're going to have a conversation with you later today. For the foundational piece, we're looking at those bottom 3 levels, but yes, we will go to that higher order thinking as we progress into more advanced programs and understanding that. So let's look at let's look at learning objectives and what is their importance and their purpose. So we wanted to have you use your annotation tool. You can go to the top of the screen under view options, click on that and go down to annotate. And then when you go to annotate, you have a number of things to choose from. I encourage you to go to the stamp. You could pick the check mark or the star or something, and then put a stamp beside all of the reasons why you think learning objectives are important. There's some that are correct here and some that are incorrect. That's all we're going to tell you.
And if you're having any trouble finding your annotation tools, please just let us know.
So you go to the top and you'll see a drop-down menu. You can hit annotate, go to stamp, and then you can pick whatever stamp you'd like, check mark, star, whatever. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Thanks, Olivia.
There she goes. Richard.
Okay.
So learning objectives are one of those things that people often overlook. Sue and I often talk about this, and we know in theory what we ought to do, right? And then there's practical real world. And so most of us jump to creating content, and then we say, oh, we should really create some learning objectives. And that's not the way we want to go about it. We want to establish the learning objectives up front, and that really is the important piece. So they play a very, very important role. And to be quite honest, they don't get the props they deserve, do they, Sue?
No, they actually don't. And most of the time are not done well. And Giselle and I have both been asked back to speak at different conferences because we write proper learning objectives. So Giselle, I think they're doing really well. What do you think?
Really well, really well.
Okay, I'm sure everybody is interested in seeing the correct answer. So here we go.
Or the incorrect, we're gonna at least show you the incorrect ones, so you'll know everything else that was right.
All right. Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's gonna let me, hang on, let me see if it's not gonna let me, there we go.
There you go.
All right. So, wow, good job.
Great job.
Nice
so
job.
See, we wanted to highlight a few of them that are not actually the purpose and importance. Market or present a training session or a presentation. That's not the role of learning objectives. Sometimes they're used. Sometimes we'll often use them in our outline. But people will confuse that and say, well, I did use learning objectives. Look, I said all the things that are going to happen in this workshop or presentation. And that's really not usually learning objectives. It's often marketing speak. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, the difference between learning objectives and learning outcomes. We don't actually measure them individually on a session evaluation form. Very, very rarely do we do that. We may ask whether or not learning objectives were achieved, but we wouldn't break down the list, which could be in some cases for a half day or full day workshop, we could have 10, 12, 15 learning objectives. So they are, though, absolutely, you see their direction of what to measure to determine the success of your program. So it sets that direction and gives you guidance. The learning objectives really provide us the direction around how do we know we've been successful at the end. Can learners do what we intended them to do at the end of our experience, our learning experience? They're not just to apply the academic model. Nobody said that, so I'm glad that you got that. And provide direction on how to deliver a live session. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that you'll notice we have there, it gives direction around what content to include. So what are you going to include, and probably the order and the flow is going to be evaluated using your learning objectives, but it's not going to give you any tips around your facilitation skills and your live delivery.
Right, exactly. And I think for me, this can be quite a confusing concept for people, but for me, you almost can't create a good learning program without learning objectives, because they really do. For me, it's the three things on the left-hand side here. It's these three things. They really do set the foundation. They set your evaluation strategy, and this is particularly important. They tell you what to include, and more importantly, what not to include, so it does not become information overload and everything's relevant to the outcome. So speaking of outcomes, Giselle, there's something that's often very confusing, and Steve knows this because he's been in our support calls for our program, where we've had a couple of calls with big discussions around this one topic. And that is, what is the difference between a learning outcome and a learning objective? You'll often see three things. You'll often see the goal of the workshop, the learning outcomes, and the learning objectives. And it really gets confusing. And the interesting thing is, if you do research on this, there is absolutely no conclusive agreement on how these terms are used. And so often they're used interchangeably. Now, Giselle and I have been doing this for over 40 years combined. So it's a very long time. And we kind of have our own definition, Giselle, if you will, that we work to, don't we? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we look at the outcome as being the broad objectives. If you follow ATD at all, they often call it the terminal objective. So an outcome is, what is the end result? So what will they be able to do differently, or know more about, or demonstrate after the training program? And then the objectives are the individual statements about what the learner will be able to do or what they will learn. So Giselle, you've got really good example from your generational stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so for example, Eve, we've worked together many, many times on our generational training and learning outcomes. We discuss to the business, right? Around, okay, we're going to be delivering, say, a workshop, a lot of work around multi-generational differences in the workplace. So an outcome might be there's going to be improved collaboration across these multi-generational teams that are working together. These are often things that we go to the business with, or certainly those of us in HR, we communicate that broadly across the organization or to leaders, because people that are not in the L&D function, they don't understand learning objectives. Some of us in the L&D function, we don't fully get it every day. So we don't really want to go to the market with that. This is a bigger statement around some of the things. So it could be improving leadership skills as it relates to a particular topic. It may be, customer service that's going to retain more clients, whatever it is. These are the broad statements. And then when we look at the learning objectives, though, I would say by the end of this workshop, for example, participants will be able to identify what each generation contributes to the team's success. So we're going to look at pros and cons and strengths and opportunities to leverage across those generations, and tips to increase team collaboration, where there would actually be a list of tips. And those are learning objectives that I can measure. Do people understand that? Can they list it by identifying it? And can they apply those tips when they move back into the workforce?
And so Giselle, if those two things are achieved, then in fact, the outcome is achieved.
That's right. That's right. So the learning objectives support the accomplishment, the success of the learning outcome. So we just wanted to highlight this because you will see these terms interchangeably. You can use them interchangeably. We are pretty clear when we refer to learning objectives, we are referring to the bottom, right? The statement that what the learner will be able to do. And that goes back to the importance. That's to Sue's point. If we know that, then that guides the content. What are we going to include or what are we going to exclude based on that? When they're too vague, then we end up cramming a whole bunch of information into our program that may not be relevant at all. And time is always our issue, isn't it? When we're delivering, a 60, how many times have we been asked to deliver 60 to 90-minute training workshops, right? For those of you that are presenters, that's fine. That's great for a presentation side. You're probably not going to achieve full training. You're definitely not going to achieve the training, the 70-30, if we're only have 60 to 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's very difficult to achieve that level of learning, which is application in that time frame. So we're going to watch again another clip from
again. You are in the video too.
I'm in the video. It just, these clips I thought were these are more succinct. Because Giselle and I could talk forever about this topic. Obviously, we're very passionate about it. So the videos get this across succinctly, and there's some great examples in this particular video as well. So let's take a look.
So do you remember when I spoke about the Bloom's taxonomy, that pyramid, where there was fundamental, foundational knowledge that you needed, and then we moved up the level? Well, at this point in your design, you need to combine these two concepts together: levels of learning and structuring learning objectives. So let's focus on those bottom three parts of Bloom's taxonomy: knowledge, comprehension, and application. So we know once we move into the application phase that we're moving into training. And based on the levels of learning you want to achieve in your training program, you will need to use different keywords when creating your learning objectives. Now, again, this can be a concept that's quite challenging for people because we tend to want to write learning objectives around what we want to instruct as trainers. We think, oh, I have a topic, I want them to learn that. And then we go back and we create a learning objective around that. But that's not, in fact, the way it should be done. It should be driven from the know your audience analysis. And as we heard from Sue, really understanding what do you want them to do differently. So when we create learning objectives at the knowledge level, you want to use words like list, define, describe, or state. And you'll notice that we use a lot of these words in our learning objectives for this program. When you move up and you want people to understand or comprehend something, be able to do something and understand it a little deeper, you're going to write learning objectives that use the terms describe, discuss, summarize key concepts. We're asking people then at that point to not just know something, but to internalize it. And then when we reach that sweet spot in that middle of that pyramid, which is apply, you want to create learning objectives that will use action words, applying, demonstrating, completing. And this allows you to not only have the learner apply something in real time, but you can actually observe it in real time. So let's walk through an example of how you can actually apply this to a training program. Imagine that you've been asked to create a training program around how to design and implement impactful PowerPoint presentations. Based on your audience, you may know that they have not had any training in this area at all, and they actually don't know the correct use of PowerPoint and haven't been taught any of the visually appealing cues or design techniques to apply. So, if you were creating a learning objective for this program, it might go something like this. By the end of this workshop, you, the participants, will be able to list characteristics of an impactful PowerPoint presentation, describe the 3 most important guidelines for creating a PowerPoint presentation, and apply 5 PowerPoint guidelines when creating your next presentation. Can you see what we did there? In those learning objectives, we used words that allowed the learner to understand what they're going to know, comprehend, and apply by attending that workshop. We use those action words so that we could help them understand the process they're going to go through, and again, would allow me, let's say if I'm facilitating this workshop, to measure that they actually did it. The goal is to keep it very simple when you're creating learning objectives. If you notice, we were only using one statement. What that means is we do not want to have what's called double-barreled learning objectives. We do not want to combine 2 different concepts together in the same learning objective. Your learning objectives will guide you in the information you need to create around your training program. It will guide you around what you have to do in order to allow learners to go through that path and get to the outcome.
All right.
So do you remember?
So there we go.
It's always brutal to watch me on video, by the way. So watch ourselves is really hard. So yeah, so you're going to give us a process that is really something that we use all the time to make it simple in our minds.
Yeah. So I think this is a sometimes quite complex learning objectives. I know when I went to university for adult education and instructional design, I aced everything else, but I could not get my mind around this. And so the simple way to think about this, the simple way to do it, what is the outcome? So you want to first think about what's going to be different. What will they be able to do differently? What will they think differently? What will change after this learning session? So what's the point? Why are you doing this? What is the outcome that's desired? And then you want to brainstorm all of the potential content or all of the topics that you're going to need to teach them in order to achieve that outcome. You then want to rank order that content so it flows properly. In the PowerPoint example, it would be very difficult to teach someone how to put a PowerPoint presentation together if they didn't know how to use PowerPoint. So you would have to start with how to use PowerPoint before you started teaching them fancy techniques. So you want to rank order that content so it flows properly. And once you've done that, then you can start to take that content and turn each piece into a learning objective. And that's how you will know that you'll achieve that outcome. So if you break it down like that, it doesn't have to be that difficult. So Giselle, do you want to just take us through the example of our workshop here?
Yes,
webinar?
absolutely. And before I do that, I just wanted to highlight Janice's point around how do we leverage them with subject matter experts. So if we actually go back real quick to that pyramid, Janice, you're going to be engaging your subject matter experts at the define the learning outcomes. And then when you've gone through this and you've written your learning objectives, you can go back to the subject matter expert. Let's say if they're not delivering the content for you or with you, to say these are learning objectives that we now have that support this. Does this align to your thinking? Does this align to your vision? If they are actually going to be delivering the content, which a lot of subject matter experts are leveraged internally, then we need to teach them how to effectively write learning objectives. And that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. So let's then look at our program, what we had here for this, right? You'll notice we use the word state, the importance, identify, and write. So curious, type in the chat box, which level of learning do you think we were trying to achieve here with this webinar? If we are paying attention during this session, type in the chat box, what level of learning do you think we wanted to achieve here based on the words that we used? This is really testing people.
Nobody's typing anything.
I know no one's typing anything. And knowledge, Michelle says, yeah, because we know, right? We only had 60 minutes.
Yeah.
A little bit of comprehension. We're not really going to get to full application, but you notice we are going to give you a breakout activity now on how to apply something. So even in the 60 minutes, yes, see if we wanted knowledge and some application, because we're saying by the end. So we're going to actually be able to test these. Can you state the importance? Can you identify? And can you write? We're not going to have a full evaluation in this webinar in order to achieve those, but you can notice, and we did not make them double-barreled. I am particularly, Sue knows this is like a bone I have to pick. Do not do double-barreled learning objectives. I go to so many conferences and workshops, and first of all, it sounds like if you attend that session, you're going to, save the world, walk on water, and there'll be world peace, and everything's crammed in there. Oh, they're boring when they're simple, but that means we can measure them. Yeah. So over to our
just one other thing. Can I just add to that before we start our breakout group? The other benefit to this is, and Giselle, it comes to what you just said, because you and I talk about this all the time. You actually can tell if someone knows anything about learning and development by the learning objectives. Can't you?
Yep, absolutely.
So
yeah, as we said, we've heard so many times people say, especially when you are trying to market a program broadly, and if you are trying to target, so I'm thinking about you, Richard, if you're building some curriculum and content and marketing that out to an educated community, if they don't see well-written learning objectives, they don't necessarily trust that the program will be effectively run.
So it does become a very important topic and a very important area of mastery. So what do you think, Giselle? So shall we have them attempt this?
Absolutely. Hopefully everyone is ready for this. We're going to move into our breakout activity.
Yeah, we are. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to take right now, we're going to give you about 5 minutes, and we'll check with you on time to see if you need any more or any less. But we want to give you 5 minutes. We'd like you to think about what your own program, so one you're developing or designing right now, maybe one you've done in the past. Maybe it's a corporate program or a program you attended, but think about the program. Think about the outcome. So what was it designed to achieve? And what is all of the content that you need to teach them in order to achieve that outcome? So in other words, I'm asking you to do this. That's what we're asking you to do. So think about that outcome. What is all of the content or some of the content you'll need to teach them? And then choose one of those pieces of content and see if you can write a learning objective around that one piece of content. Okay, so that's your challenge. So we're going to set 5 minutes to give you a minute, to give you time to do that. After which we're going to put you in breakout groups, and you'll get a chance to share your learning objective with some colleagues and get some feedback, and then we'll hopefully hear one or two out loud. All right, so 5 minutes, think about your program. What's the outcome? What is all of the content? Choose one piece and see if you can write a learning objective. For an extra challenge, see if you can write it at the application level.